My name is Michael Reynolds. I'm 41 years old, and I thought I had finally found some peace in Augusta, Georgia. After my divorce last year, I moved here to start fresh, away from all the memories that haunted me back in Atlanta. The red clay roads, the humidity that clings to your skin like a second layer, the sound of cicadas in the evening. This place was supposed to be my sanctuary, but that Tuesday morning in March, everything I thought I knew about trust and starting over came crashing down around me. For anyone listening to this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from so I can include a special shout out for you in an upcoming story. I was rushing to work at the auto parts store where I'd been employed for 8 months. Nothing fancy, just honest work that paid the bills and kept my mind occupied. The morning was typical for Georgia in early spring. That crisp air with a hint of warmth promising the heat that would come later. I remember stopping at Murphy's Diner for my usual coffee and biscuit. Miss Tatterson behind the counter always asked about my back pain, which had been getting worse for weeks. "You still hurting, honey?" she'd say in that thick southern drawl that reminded me why I loved this town. "You need to see somebody about that." I kept brushing it off. Money was tight, and I didn't have great insurance. Plus, I'm the kind of man who thinks he can push through anything. My daddy raised me that way. Reynolds men don't complain, he used to say. But that morning, as I bent down to pick up a dropped transmission part at work, something in my lower back snapped like a rubber band, stretched too far. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It shot down my legs like electricity, and I couldn't stand up straight. My coworker Jimmy took one look at me and said, "Mike, you're white as a sheet. We're getting you to the hospital." The emergency room at Augusta University Medical Center was buzzing with the usual chaos. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, the smell of disinfectant mixed with coffee from the vending machines, and that particular sound hospitals make, a combination of beeping machines, squeaking wheels, and hushed conversations that carry more weight than they should. Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, examined me with the kind of efficiency that comes from years of experience. "Mr. Reynolds, you've got a severely herniated disc. We need to operate immediately to prevent permanent nerve damage." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Surgery meant time off work, medical bills I couldn't afford, and being completely vulnerable, something I'd spent the last year trying to avoid. Since my divorce from Rebecca, I'd built my entire life around self-reliance. No dependencies, no deep connections, just me and my small apartment, with its view of the Savannah River. "How long will I be down?" I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. 6 to 8 weeks minimum. You'll need help during recovery, someone to drive you to appointments, help with groceries, basic care. That's when panic set in. I had no family in Augusta. My ex-wife was back in Atlanta, probably celebrating the fact that I was finally paying for all my mistakes. My parents had passed away years ago, and I'd been so focused on starting over that I hadn't built any real friendships here. As they wheeled me into pre-op, my phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor Sarah. She lived in the apartment next to mine, a kind woman in her early 30s who worked as a nurse at a different hospital. We'd exchanged pleasantries in the hallway, shared the occasional conversation about the weather or the Georgia Bulldogs. "Hey Mike, Jimmy from your work called me. Heard about your surgery. Don't worry about anything, I'll take care of you during recovery. Focus on getting better." In that moment, lying on a hospital gurney with an IV in my arm, Sarah felt like an angel sent from heaven. The surgery went well, but recovery was brutal. Those first few days were a haze of pain medication and frustration. I'd always been an independent man, and suddenly I couldn't even get to the bathroom without help. Sarah showed up every day after her shifts, bringing homemade soup that tasted like something my grandmother might have made. Chicken and dumplings with just the right amount of pepper cornbread that crumbled perfectly in your hand. "You don't have to do this," I told her on the third day, feeling guilty about the burden I'd become. "Mike, I'm a nurse. Taking care of people is what I do," she said with a smile that seemed to light up my dim apartment. "Besides, neighbors help neighbors, that's what makes a community." Sarah had this way about her, gentle hands when she helped me change bandages, a soft voice when she reminded me to take my medications, and a laugh that filled the empty spaces in my apartment. She'd grown up in Augusta, knew all the local spots, and had stories about the town that made me feel more connected to this place than I had in months. She took over everything: grocery shopping, picking up prescriptions, driving me to follow-up appointments. She even organized my bills, setting them on the kitchen table in neat piles. Just to help you stay organized while you recover, she explained. During those long afternoons when the pain medication made everything feel fuzzy, we'd talk for hours. She told me about her childhood, how her parents had immigrated from Taiwan and opened a small restaurant downtown, how she'd become a nurse because she wanted to help people, but sometimes felt burnt out by the system. I found myself opening up in ways I hadn't since before my marriage fell apart. "What happened with your wife?" she asked, one evening, as we watched the sunset paint the Savannah River orange and pink. I told her about Rebecca, about how I'd worked too much, drank too much, and forgot how to be a husband, how the divorce had been my fault as much as hers, maybe more. Sarah listened without judgment, just nodding and occasionally touching my hand in a way that made me feel less alone than I had in years. By the 4th week of recovery, something had shifted between Sarah and me. What started as neighborly kindness had become something deep. She'd stay later each evening, and we'd fallen into a comfortable routine. She'd make dinner, simple things like grilled chicken with sweet potato fries, or beef stew with homemade biscuits, and we'd eat while watching old movies on my beat-up television. "You know," she said one night, after we'd finished watching The Shawshank Redemption, "I never thought I'd find someone who appreciates the classics like I do." The way she said it, with her head resting against my shoulder despite my protest that I was still healing, made my heart do something it hadn't done in years. I was falling for her, and for the first time since my divorce, that didn't terrify me. Sarah had this way of making everything feel easier. She'd reorganized my entire apartment, claiming it would help me navigate better, while I was still using a walker. My medications were sorted in a weekly pill organizer. My bills were filed in a proper system. Even my bank statements were organized in a folder she'd labeled "Financial Stuff, Mike." "I hope you don't mind," she said, holding up the folder. "I needed to find your insurance information for the physical therapy appointment, and your paperwork was kind of scattered." I didn't mind. If anything, I was grateful. For the first time in years, my life felt manageable, organized, cared for. Sarah had brought order to chaos, and more than that, she'd brought warmth to a life that had been cold for too long. She started staying overnight sometimes, sleeping on the couch and claiming she wanted to be there in case I needed help during the night. Those mornings when I'd wake up to the smell of coffee brewing and eggs cooking felt like glimpses of a life I thought I'd never have again. "I could get used to this," I told her one morning as she handed me a cup of coffee fixed exactly the way I liked it. 2 sugars, splash of cream. "Maybe you should," she replied, and there was something in her voice that sounded like a promise. It was a Friday afternoon in my 6th week of recovery, when the first strange thing happened. I was sitting on the couch doing my physical therapy exercises when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my bank's customer service number. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Jennifer from Augusta Federal Bank. We're calling about some unusual activity on your checking account. Have you been making large withdrawals recently?" My stomach dropped. "What kind of withdrawals?" "We show 3 withdrawals in the past 2 weeks, 2 for $800 each, and 1 for $12, all from the ATM on Washington Road." I knew that ATM, it was near the grocery store where Sarah did my shopping, but I hadn't left the apartment except for medical appointments, and I certainly hadn't made any large withdrawals. "There must be some mistake," I said. "I've been recovering from surgery. I haven't been anywhere near that ATM." "Sir, the withdrawals were made using your card and PIN. If you didn't authorize these transactions, we need to report this as fraud immediately." After I hung up, I sat there staring at my wallet on the coffee table. My debit card was right where it should be, but how could someone have used it without having the physical card? Unless, I thought about Sarah organizing my bills, helping with my paperwork, having access to everything in my apartment while I was knocked out on pain medication. No, I told myself, Sarah was helping me. She was taking care of me. There had to be another explanation. When she arrived that evening with Chinese takeout from her parents' restaurant, I decided to ask her about it. "Hey, you haven't noticed anything weird with my bank stuff, have you? They called about some withdrawals I don't remember making." Sarah looked concerned, setting down the bag of food and sitting beside me. "Oh no, Mike. Do you think someone stole your information? Identity theft is so common these days." Her reaction seemed genuine, worried. She helped me call the bank back and stayed on the line while we disputed the charges. But something nagged at me, a small voice in the back of my head that I kept trying to silence. The doubt started eating at me over the weekend. I tried to push it away, telling myself I was being paranoid, that the pain medication was making me suspicious of the one person who'd been there for me. But Monday morning, while Sarah was at work, I decided to check my recent bank statements more carefully. I pulled out the folder she'd organized for me, the one labeled Financial Stuff, Mike. As I went through the statements, my hands started shaking, not from my medication this time, but from what I was seeing. The first unauthorized withdrawal had happened just 3 days after my surgery, when I was barely conscious from the anesthesia and pain medication. The second one was the day after Sarah had helped me set up online banking to make things easier. The third was last week, when she'd volunteered to go grocery shopping and had been gone for almost 3 hours. But it was what I found at the bottom of the folder that made my blood run cold. Tucked behind my insurance papers was a small piece of paper with my PIN written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Not mine, but not Sarah's usual neat cursive either. It looked like someone had tried to disguise their handwriting. My hands were trembling as I called the bank again. "Jennifer, this is Mike Reynolds. I need to know exactly when those withdrawals were made, dates and times." As she read off the information, each detail was like a nail in a coffin. I didn't want to build. The times matched perfectly with when Sarah had been out running errands for me. The ATM location was on her route to the grocery store she always went to. "Mr. Reynolds, we also show that someone accessed your online banking last Tuesday at 2:47 p.m. Was that you?" Last Tuesday at 2:47 p.m., I had been asleep on the couch. Sarah had been in my apartment, supposedly cleaning the kitchen. She would have had access to my laptop, which was sitting open on the dining table. The woman I had started to love, the woman I had trusted with my recovery, my home, my vulnerability, she was stealing from me. I spent the rest of Monday in a state of shock. Part of me wanted to believe there was still an explanation, that somehow I was wrong about Sarah. The other part of me felt like an idiot for letting my guard down, for trusting someone so completely after I'd promised myself I'd never be that vulnerable again. When Sarah arrived that evening with her usual bright smile and a bag from the pharmacy, I felt sick to my stomach. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, kissing my forehead in the way that had become our routine. "Your prescription refill is in the bag, and I picked up some of that ice cream you like." The normalcy of it all made everything worse. Here she was, acting like the caring, devoted woman I'd fallen for, while she'd been systematically robbing me blind. "Sarah, we need to talk." Something in my tone must have alerted her, because her smile faltered slightly. "Is everything okay? You look upset?" The bank called again. They found more unauthorized withdrawals. I watched her face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt or recognition. For just a split second I saw something, a flicker of panic, but then her expression shifted to concern. "Oh my God, Mike. How much more?" $2,800 total. All from the ATM on Washington Road. I paused, letting that sink in. "The same ATM you pass when you go grocery shopping for me. You're not suggesting..." She stood up quickly, her voice rising. "Mike, you can't seriously think I had anything to do with this." I found my PIN written down in my financial folder. The folder you organized. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her mind working, calculating, figuring out what to say next. "I can't believe you're accusing me of this," she finally said, and there were tears in her eyes. "After everything I've done for you, after I put my own life on hold to take care of you, this is how you repay me." The tears looked real. The hurt in her voice sounded genuine. For a moment I almost apologized, almost convinced myself I was wrong. But then I thought about the evidence, about the timing, about the fact that only she had access to my personal information. "Sarah, please, just tell me the truth." She stood there for another moment, tears streaming down her face, and then something changed. The mask slipped, her shoulders straightened, the tears stopped, and when she looked at me again, I was looking at a stranger. "You want the truth, Mike? The truth is you're a pathetic, lonely man, who was so desperate for attention that you let a stranger take over your entire life." What happened next was like watching someone I thought I knew transform into a completely different person. The gentle, caring Sarah disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "You made it so easy," she said, sitting back down but keeping her distance. "Do you know how simple it was to get your PIN? You were so drugged up those first few days, mumbling numbers in your sleep. And your laptop? You had all your passwords saved. Your banking information was right there. The casual way she said it, like she was discussing the weather, made me feel physically ill. But why? I asked. You have a job, a life, why steal from me? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. A nursing salary in Georgia barely covers my student loans. Do you know how much debt I'm carrying? How hard it is to get ahead in this place. So you decided to rob your neighbor? I decided to take advantage of an opportunity, she corrected. You think this was my first time? Lonely men recovering from surgery. Divorced guys starting over. You're all the same, desperate for someone to care about you, willing to trust anyone who shows you a little kindness. The words hit me like physical blows. Everything I thought we'd had, every moment of connection, every touch and conversation, and shared laugh, it had all been a lie, a performance designed to make me vulnerable. The other men, how many others? You're number 4, she said matter-of-factly, though you lasted the longest. Usually I can get what I need in 3 or 4 weeks, but you were so grateful, so eager to trust me, that I decided to milk it a little longer. I thought about all the times she'd stayed overnight, all the intimate conversations, the way she'd made me feel like maybe I could love again. It had all been a con, a carefully orchestrated manipulation, designed to drain my bank account. I called the police, I lied, hoping to gauge her reaction. Sarah shrugged. Go ahead. What are you going to tell them? That your girlfriend helped you manage your finance, that you willingly gave her access to your personal information. Good luck proving intent. She was right. And she knew it. I had given her access to everything. I had trusted her completely. From the outside, it would look like a relationship gone wrong. Not. Besides, she continued, standing up and gathering her things. I'll be long gone by tomorrow. There are other cities, other lonely men who need someone to take care of them. After Sarah left that night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the remnants of what I thought had been love. The organized bills, the medical supplies she'd carefully arranged, the extra pillow on my couch, where she used to sleep. Everything felt contaminated now, poisoned by the knowledge of what it really was. I didn't sleep. I spent the night going through everything she'd touched, everything she'd organized, looking for any other signs of her deception. I found my spare house key missing from the kitchen drawer. I found copies of my bank statements with certain transactions highlighted. I found a notebook in my bedroom nightstand, with what looked like notes about my routine, my habits, my vulnerabilities. The worst part wasn't the money. Though $2,800 was a lot for someone like me, the worst part was how completely I'd been fooled. How she'd read me like a book and played exactly the role she knew I needed. The caring nurse, the understanding neighbor, the woman who could help me heal from my divorce and trust again. I called in sick to work the next day and spent the morning at the police station. Detective Rodriguez was sympathetic but not optimistic. Mr. Reynolds, I understand this is painful, but proving theft is going to be difficult. She had legitimate access to your home, and you willingly shared your personal information with her. But she stole my PIN, used my card without permission, which she'll claim you gave her permission to use, without witnesses or clear evidence of intent to steal. This becomes a civil matter, not criminal. Walking out of that police station, I felt defeated in a way I hadn't experienced even during my divorce. At least with Rebecca, our problems had been real relationship issues, communication, incompatibility, my own failures as a husband. This was being targeted and manipulated by someone who saw me as nothing more than a mark. I spent the next few days in a dark place, questioning everything about myself. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have missed all the signs? What was wrong with me that I kept attracting people who wanted to use me? But on Thursday, something changed. I was sitting on my couch, still wearing the same clothes from 2 days earlier, when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson from Murphy's Diner. Honey, Jimmy told me you were having a rough time. I made you some of my famous peach cobbler. I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with a still warm cobbler and a thermos of coffee. She took one look at me and shook her head. Lord have mercy, Mike. You look like you've been hit by a truck. Mrs. Patterson didn't ask a lot of questions. She just sat with me while I ate her cobbler and slowly told her what had happened. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You know what I think? She finally said. I think you got conned by someone who was real good at it. And I think beating yourself up about it isn't going to help anybody. But I should have seen the signs. I should have been smarter. Honey, there's a difference between being smart and being human. You needed help, and someone offered it. You wanted to trust again, and someone took advantage of that. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you hopeful. And hope isn't something to be ashamed of. Over the next few weeks, as I continued my physical recovery, I also began a different kind of healing. I reported the fraud to my bank and credit card companies. I changed all my passwords and PINs. I had the locks changed on my apartment. But more importantly, I started talking to people. Jimmy from work invited me to watch a Braves game at his house. Miss Patterson introduced me to her nephew, who worked at the garage down the street and needed someone to help with inventory on weekends. I joined a physical therapy group where I met other people dealing with back injuries and recovery. Slowly, I began to rebuild my life, but this time I did it differently. Instead of isolating myself and then trusting one person completely, I built a network of smaller, more gradual relationships. I learned to accept help without surrendering my independence entirely. 3 months after Sarah disappeared, Detective Rodriguez called me. "Mr. Reynolds, we arrested someone matching the description you gave us. She was running the same con on a man recovering from heart surgery in Savannah. We found evidence linking her to similar schemes in 3 other cities." It turned out Sarah Chen wasn't even her real name. Her real name was Jennifer Walsh, and she'd been running this particular con for almost 2 years. The man in Savannah had lost $4,500 before he got suspicious. She'd left a trail of lonely, vulnerable men across Georgia and South Carolina. "Will I get my money back?" I asked. "Some of it, maybe. She spent most of what she stole, but we'll do what we can." I hung up feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Vindication because I hadn't been wrong about what happened to me. Sadness because I thought about all those other men, guys like me who had just wanted someone to care about them during a difficult time. 6 months later, I'm back at work full-time. My back is stronger, though I'll never be. I've been on a few dates with a teacher I met at the physical therapy group. Nothing serious yet, but we're taking our time, building trust slowly and carefully. I still live in the same apartment, though I've redecorated it completely. The view of the Savannah River is still beautiful, especially at sunset. Sometimes I think about what Sarah said, about me being pathetic and desperate. And you know what? Maybe I was, for a while, but being lonely doesn't make you deserve to be taken advantage of. Wanting to trust again after you've been hurt doesn't make you weak. Last week, I saw a man at Murphy's Diner who reminded me of myself 8 months ago, recently divorced, new to town, looking lost and isolated. Patterson was chatting with him, being kind, and I thought about going over to introduce myself. Not to warn him about women like Sarah, but to offer genuine friendship, the kind I wish I'd had when I first moved here. Because here's what I learned: the opposite of being conned isn't becoming suspicious of everyone. The opposite of being conned is learning to trust wisely, to build relationships gradually, and to never let someone else's cruelty convince you that kindness doesn't exist. I'm 41 years old, and I'm starting over again. But this time, I'm not doing it alone, and I'm not doing it desperate. I'm doing it with the knowledge that I survived something that could have broken me completely, and I chose to remain open to the possibility of real connection. That's worth more than the money I lost. That's worth everything.